Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Bean. We are going to review our eek, E-A vowel team with a K at the end. Eek ending when two vowels go walking. The first one, E, does the talking and says its name, and the A is silent. One of our words that we created was peak. P on eek is peak, meaning like the top of a mountain. If we add a S to the front, we can make the word sp, eek, speak, as in raise your hand in class before you speak. We also have the word, create the word weak. W-E-A-K refers to the term weak as in you are not strong, but you are very weak. Not the days of the week. That is W-E-E-K. You could also make beak, as in the bird, b-eek, beak. You could also make the word leak, as in like there is a leak in the faucet. Today, we are going to read The Bossy Pig. This is about a pig who takes charge and wants to plan a picnic, and she tells, not asks, all of her friends what they should bring to the picnic. So take a look at some of the different ways you see animals acting as humans. What is our setting? You have some of those think bubbles. And there's going to be a big problem in this story. You're going to tell me how the problem was solved, who solved the problem, and how this story could remind you of Bear's birthday that you read earlier this week. So that's going to be a text-to-text connection, meaning a book you read and another book, and you're going to compare them and see or tell Mrs. Bean how the one book reminds you of the other, or if it does remind you of the other one. The Bossy Pig. There's that title page. Ready? We will have a picnic on Saturday. Mrs. Pig told her friends. You must come. Boys and girls, this book is longer than the last book we read. However, it is a simpler level, so this is going to be a great time for you to practice scooping 2 to 3 words at a time to sound nice and smooth. Mrs. Pig made a list. I want a table and 6 chairs, said Mrs. Pig. I want some juice and some plates. She was a very bossy pig. I can bring a blanket, said Mrs. Sheep. A blanket is not on my list, said Mrs. Pig. You bring the table. All right, said Mrs. Sheep. Boys and girls, notice how Mrs. Bean saw this bolded word, Y-O-U, you, meaning it's in darker print. And what did I do? I stressed you bring the table. So when you come to a word that is in darker print, you need to emphasize or give that word more energy. Mrs. Pig looked at her list. You bring 6 chairs, she told Mrs. Goat. All right, said Mrs. Goat. I can bring some milk, said Mrs. Cow. Milk is not on my list, said Mrs. Pig. You bring some juice. She was such a bossy pig. Boys and girls, I don't know about you, but I noticed she did not say the magic word please once yet. Mrs. Pig looked at her list again. We need plates, she told Mr. Horse. I will bring plates, said Mr. Horse. I know what I can bring, said Mrs. Owl. Don't bring anything, said Mrs. Pig. We have everything we need. But I know something else we need, said Mrs. Owl. Boys and girls, do you know what Mrs. Owl might be thinking? Let's see if you're right. We'll find out by the end. All the animals came to the picnic. They played games. Mrs. Cow flew a kite. Stop playing, said Mrs. Pig. Put the table under that big tree, said Mrs. Pig to Mrs. Sheep. Mr. Owl will help you. I wonder if she's going to have any friends by the end of this book. Set up the chairs, said Mrs. Pig to Mrs. Goat. Set the table, she told Mrs. Cow and Mr. Horse. Mrs. Pig looked at her list one last time. That's it, she said. Now please sit down. That was the only time she said that word, wasn't it? Where is the food? Asked Mrs. Goat. The food? Asked Mrs. Pig. Oh dear, I forgot the food. Mrs. Owl smiled. You forgot the food, she said, but I didn't. Boys and girls, who saved the day? Look at that picnic basket. You are a wise, wise owl, said the bossy pig. Now let's eat. Okay, so it ended up being an okay ending. Boys and girls, just to review, you're going to tell me a few of the ways that the animals took on characteristics or actions of humans. Tell me some of the characters in the story, the setting, meaning the where does this take place, the problem, how and who solved the problem, and a text-to-text, meaning a book-to-book connection between the Bossy Pig book we just read and Bear's Birthday that we read earlier in the week. How were the books similar? Okay, great job.